Metroid and Castlevania, two legendary franchises that have shaped an entire genre of gaming. Seems like an overly dramatic statement, right? It's not. These two icons not only defined their own genres, but also came together to birth something entirely new, the Metroidvania, my personal favorite genre. And while there's plenty of debate about what truly defines exactly what a Metroidvania is, a topic for another video, one thing is certain. These two franchises are the cornerstones of a genre that brought fresh ideas to the gaming world and redefined traditional conventions within video games. And when we put them head to head, does one truly stand above the other? Today we're deep diving into these classic series and their influence on the genre as a whole to find out. The purpose of this video is to break down the Metroid and Castlevania series of games, comparing their storylines, graphics, gameplay, and their overall impact on the gaming genre as a whole. We'll see how each series has evolved over the years and which one, in my opinion, stands out as the ultimate Metroidvania experience. Whether you're a longtime fan or new to these games, just like in any good Metroidvania, there's plenty here to uncover. That was a bad joke. Having set the stage, let's dive into the details of each series and discover which classic truly stands out as the pinnacle of the Metroidvania experience. Before we dive into these amazing games, with their similarities, differences, I'd like to point out that although one takes place in the depths of space and the other mostly inside of Dracula's castle, they have one major thing in common that ties both of their stories, graphics, gameplay, and music all together, and that is atmosphere. Castlevania and Metroid both have a tone and mood that, in my opinion, has never really been replicated. The fact that they managed to keep this going throughout most of the games in their respective series is just a testament to how great these games really were. In this video, I'll be skipping over specific controversies such as Metroid Other M and won't cover every game from each franchise to keep things concise. Instead, I'm focusing on the titles that best represent the genre and individual franchises. For a thorough exploration of Metroid Other M, or a deep dive into the entire catalog of these franchises, Castlevania in particular having just too many games to mention, I suggest checking out some of the amazing YouTube content by other creators after this video that showcases some of the games I won't be covering. In this video, I aim to provide a fresh perspective by comparing the two franchises and examining which had a greater impact on the genre's development after it was established. Let's start with taking a look at the story of Castlevania. Rooted in dark gothic horror and fleshed out to include everything from mummies, werewolves, and every weird or frightening folklore creature in between, it had an expansive story that, although somewhat predictable, has always been intriguing and captivating in a way that genuinely makes you wonder what twist or turn the next story beat has in store. I'm going to steer clear of diving into heavy details in the story sections to avoid spoiling any games you might want to experience for yourself. The story of Castlevania revolves around the eternal battle between the Belmont clan, a family of legendary vampire hunters, and the Dark Lord Dracula. This struggle is not just a simple tale of good versus evil. It's a saga that spans centuries and has made its continuation from the 1986 8-bit days all the way up to its final release in 2014 with Lords of Shadow 2, which, although had moved away from the typical 2D or 2.5D perspective and took more of a focus on action and 3D gameplay, it still did what each entry before it had done, and that's adding layers to the rich and complex lore of the series. The beautifully rendered pixelated castles of the early titles, filled with treacherous traps and terrifying creatures, set the stage for a relentless and very unforgiving adventure. Yet as the series and gameplay evolved, so did its storytelling. In Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, we got the ability to select from 4 different characters, which led to branching paths not only in gameplay but in story as well. The ability to select different routes while wielding different abilities from characters played previous was pivotal. To pursue forward and discover one of the game's multiple endings was something that was not popular at the time and added a real sense of depth and gravitas to the storytelling. Skipping ahead to 1997, we have arguably the one that really started its individual genre off. A lot of fans' long-standing favorite, and that is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. The story follows off the back of 1993's Rondo of Blood and sees another Belmont, this time Alucard, taking his turn at treading through Dracula's castle and all its many ramparts to confront the Lord of Darkness himself. Without going into any spoilers, this may seem pretty simple and straightforward, but the games do a great job of keeping you hooked and wanting to find out what will happen next by drip-feeding you story beats and scenes that will make you curious to see what will transpire on your inevitable path to confronting Dracula. Symphony of the Night was groundbreaking and would set the path for most Castlevania games moving forward. We now move on to where I feel the series finally got a firm grasp on what it was and what it wanted to be, and that is the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS titles. I'm a firm believer that certain games just feel better when played in a portable way. Whether it be for convenience or just the graphics and gameplay being more suited to a smaller screen, the Castlevania games I believe never shine brighter in any aspect, including the story, than when they were at home on Nintendo's portable consoles. The GBA and DS titles both continued the franchise's themes of going to battle with Dracula and other dark forces while always keeping things fresh. By adding new characters, often relatives of past favorites, sometimes unknowingly. Okay, that's a small spoiler, but I won't tell you what game it's relevant to. The storytelling in many of these games would now often see our protagonist, or more than often not protagonists, leaving Dracula's castle far more than in previous games, to explore outside areas often with their own themes and biomes that, although fantastical, managed to not feel forced and like a natural addition to the story and landscape. With more in-game cutscenes than ever before and a wider scope in the plot, the games had really come into their own by this point. I really can't talk highly enough about these titles. But we will come back to these when discussing gameplay, graphics, music, and the impact these games had on the genre as a whole, and which I think is better and why. In the time after the DS games, 4 more mainline English games would come out, not including re-releases and compilations. They followed a similar formula as the previous games as far as the Belmonts or relatives of trying to take down Dracula, while including enough plot twists to keep things interesting and fresh. The more I think about it, this family had so much inner turmoil it was something like a supernatural soap opera. Listen, I know I'm not doing the greatest job of describing just how intricate and great these stories were, but you either already know because you've experienced them for yourself, or if you really want some proof, you can look no further than the animated series on Netflix that has done an excellent job of showcasing just how nuanced and deep the Castlevania storytelling can go. Now on to the story of Metroid. The first half of the name itself speaks to the type of gameplay and story the creators wanted. Metro, referring to a metro or subway system, a labyrinth and underground network of tunnels and rooms, ripe for the players to explore, the second half of the word referring to Android, if you were curious. The story of Samus, a lone bounty hunter, out against all odds to fulfill a mission before it's too late and the clock expires, is one that is rich and complex, although on surface level may not seem so at first. The games were heavily inspired by the movie series Alien, that similarly follows a strong solo female protagonist up against a hostile alien environment. Delving into everything from mysterious origin stories to ancient alien civilizations and lost planets, the series has done a great job of drip-feeding you story as it lets your mind wander as you encounter each next mystery or environmental scan to feed into your imagination while you build out the lore in your head of what could possibly have happened or be going on in whatever location the games currently have you in. The games do a great job of letting the environments and areas you explore tell the story. Much like Castlevania, the storytelling evolved as the games went on. From its origins in 1986, telling a basic but interesting tale of a bounty hunter trying to stop a gang of space pirates from unleashing a biological weapon, to its later installments like Super Metroid, which started to add extra elements to the story and really find its footing with being more cinematic. Both Castlevania and Metroid both follow a pretty similar and simple template for each of their respective series as far as storytelling and tend to just repeat them in new ways. Both do a great job of adding layers and new elements and building on what came previous in a way that keeps any fan of one game almost instantly a fan of the next title or previous installments. In fact, Nintendo realized this, and they remade the original game in 2004 with added story and cutscenes with the excellent title of Metroid Zero Missions. Introducing lots of modern gameplay changes, but also improvements to the storytelling, a previous title named Metroid Fusion had released, which introduced this new and upgraded modern style of gameplay and storytelling for the Metroid series. In-game cinematics, short but sweet animated cutscenes, all new stuff there. A lot had improved in the 2D versions, but Nintendo would at the same time in 2002 release Metroid Prime, a fully 3D person way to experience the Metroid franchise, which although at first had a lot of fans like myself skeptical, it proved itself not only to be a competent way to tell a Metroid story, but with actual 3D cutscenes and in-game cinematics, it was in many ways an improvement. And over the rest of the course of the Prime series, we would see a fantastic trilogy of games that although took place before the second 1991 game canonically in the series, they would help to greatly expand and enhance the lore of the Metroid series as a whole. Many years later in 2021, after many rumors and speculation, we finally got the long-awaited Metroid Dread. It was the latest entry in the series story canonically as well and went on to tie up a lot of the storylines that had been left open in the previous Metroid Fusion way back in 2002. Depending who you ask, this was a great ending to the current running story or an even better beginning and jumping off point. Personally, I hope the upcoming Metroid Prime 4 will take place after Dread, but at this point I'm happy with anything that expands the lore at any place in the timeline. There were a lot of big reveals in this game, and I remember playing it in my office, sitting with all the lights off for maximum immersion and having my mind blown at the end. This game is a must-play for any sci-fi story fan. We will compare how the stories in Metroid hold up against Castlevania stories in the final segment, where I rank the two properties against each other. Okay, if you've made it this far, you've likely noticed I've skipped over some games in both franchises so far when referencing the stories. That is not because they weren't relevant or I didn't want to mention them. It's because I'm aiming to give an overall grasp and broader understanding of the stories, the way they were told, and the way they were similar and different. If I mention all 30 plus games in the Castlevania series and how each story does or doesn't tie into how Metroid Pinball is technically a retelling of Metroid Prime 1, then this video is going to be even longer than it already is. With that out the way, let's jump into what matters in any game over story and anything else at the end of the day. The graphics. No, that is wrong and a big problem in the gaming industry, and we are not going to talk about it right now. But we will come back to the graphics later. For now, let's focus on the real important factor of any game, the gameplay. The core gameplay and melding of both these franchises is the reason we have so many amazing Metroidvania titles today, or why the genre even exists. Almost every one of these new titles today draws some inspiration from the Castlevania and Metroid series of games. They set the individual building blocks of the genre. Before we go any further, let's take a brief moment to mention what exactly is a Metroidvania. Obviously, it's the combination of the two names Castlevania and Metroid, but what defines the gameplay of a Metroidvania? For that, we go all the way back to 1986, where Satoru Okada and Yoshi Sakamoto came up with the brilliant idea of, what if we have the player go left? You see, up until that time, platforming games had always seen the player run towards the right of the screen, until finally reaching an endpoint. Instead, they wondered, what if the player had to explore and backtrack and use their wits to figure out where to go? Like the name Metroid entailed, they wanted a deep sense of exploration. This theme of grand adventure would only expand as the titles went on, and would come to be a defining part of the series. Once the Metroidvania games had found their footing, so did their counterpart, Castlevania, which once it moved away from its linear exploration and introduced players to a similar sense of open exploration like in Metroid, it never really looked back. It also introduced RPG elements to the newly defined genre, allowing players to get even more immersed in these thrilling games. The one and major commonality we would see is the use of some newly discovered power or ability, finally giving you access to some previously blocked off route. This non-linear style of gameplay, mixed with backtracking and RPG-influenced combat platforming, is what would come to define the genre and be known as the Metroidvania. Now, this is not even the most detailed explanation of the genre, and unless I want to spend 2 hours explaining myself or start a war in the comment section on what is or isn't a Metroidvania, then let's just leave the explanation here. You explore, you backtrack, unlock new abilities that lead to new exploration and customization, solve environmental puzzles, and further expand your combat and exploration options. Rinse and repeat. That is the simplest way I can define it. Many games would start to piggyback off this newly brewed formula and find success. Look no further today than the widely known and acclaimed titles in the genre like Hollow Knight and the Ori series. I would also call Hollow Knight a series, but, well, you know. Both incorporated everything the Metroid and Castlevania series did and put their own spin on it. The frequent release of new Metroidvanias each year illustrates the strong and enduring dedication players have for this genre. Metroid was more known for a non-linear style, with unlocking new abilities and ways to navigate around, while Castlevania expanded on this idea and added more customization and RPG elements to the gameplay. Metroid leaning more into using new upgrades, while Castlevania focused more on the RPG elements like leveling up and skill customization. Both series of titles would begin to offer larger and larger areas to explore, with many zones being totally skippable or missable if you didn't know where to look. Players used to playing 2D games where you would never need a sense of direction often found themselves lost and wondering what to do next. This was a turnoff for some players, but for many more like myself, it was a great feeling. All this atmosphere the games would create would just lean into the sense of being lost and having to figure out which hidden door or hallway you may have missed or need to go back to. Players who didn't enjoy this wouldn't be wrong for getting frustrated, if unprepared for that style of gameplay. Dracula's Castle and Symphony of the Night, and many games after, was so big you could not be faulted for not being able to find your way around if you didn't have a good sense of direction. The maps provided in both Metroid and Castlevania games would serve to help mitigate some of this confusion, but I honestly don't blame those who got constantly lost. I'm pretty sure if you explored long enough, you might be able to find a Starbucks somewhere inside of Dracula's Castle. All the titles released after Symphony of the Night in both the Metroid and Castlevania series would fully adopt this newly cemented style of gameplay and go on to release many more highly regarded and well-received offerings in their respective series. At this point, I have to speak on the Metroid Prime trilogy and the Lords of Shadow title and its sequel. These games, as I mentioned earlier, took the leap into full 3D gameplay and, depending who you ask, either improved or became worse because of it. The Castlevania Lords of Shadow games basically differ completely from what the two series had built together beforehand. Konami couldn't be blamed for trying, as they had received some reasonably warm welcome reception to some of their earlier 3D outings, like Lament of Darkness on the PS2. These newer titles did not receive the same warm welcome from fans of the genre. This was to keep up with what was popular at the time. Games like God of War and Devil May Cry had players craving more fast action-based 3D gameplay, and while the second Lords of Shadow tried to go back to some of its roots with its more open areas, it ultimately failed as an action game and whatever else it was trying to be. Metroid, on the other hand, implemented Metroidvania style into its new first-person perspective in a way that was so good, it felt like they had done the impossible. Open areas, backtracking, secrets to uncover, areas gated off by abilities you hadn't uncovered yet, it was all still there. Nothing felt compromised here. If anything, it was amplified, with new abilities like scanning the environment for new knowledge, clues, and tidbits of lore. The game, and mostly the ones that followed, were true Metroidvanias, at their core, while the third installment moved more action-focused gameplay, but didn't lose its essence, and unlike Castlevania's counterpart, it still very much felt like a proper Metroid game. I'll touch on which franchise I think did the whole 2D Metroidvania genre as a whole the best in the final section, and which, if I had to pick one in the series, I would go with. For now, as far as 3D, the Prime series is clearly on another level, and managed to keep itself within its own genre, so for that alone, it's a clear winner for me by any measurement. Now, all of this story, gameplay, and exploration wouldn't be as outstanding as it is, and the atmospheres wouldn't be as gripping and defining as they are without the use of some excellent graphics and sound design to bring it to life. Both series have always had a certain ambience that just can't be replicated outside of themselves. Metroid and Castlevania have another thing in common I've yet failed to touch on clearly, and that's immersion. The way the pixels came to life on screen, to the way the music always set the perfect tone for whatever area you were in, they both were masters of keeping the player engaged. However, they would do this in almost totally different ways, especially when it came to sound design. So here is where we touch on sound. Castlevania often used upbeat music to create a sense of urgency and tension. It used orchestral instruments to create a dark and dramatic tone. The music quite literally sounds supernatural. Once the technology allowed for it, you could often find more metal sounds incorporated and added to create more energetic sounds, which wasn't jarring as the music in Castlevania was normally meant to sound epic in scale. You'd be hard-pressed to find a moment of silence in any Castlevania game, which was and is quite the opposite of the Metroid titles, where Castlevania did everything in its power to make the music match the fast-paced and frantic combat to build atmosphere and tone. Metroid went in the opposite direction. In my opinion, this is where the two series differ the most. Metroid would focus on more ambient sounds and environmental sounds to create a sense of isolation, something no game had ever done as well as Metroid, and I still don't think any game has done as well since. The feeling of being alone really is emphasized by the game's mysterious and eerie sounds. Where Castlevania would use loud, clear sounds, Metroid would use more subtle sounds and noises that almost felt haunting. The isolation feeling is amplified by the sense of loneliness while you explore an often abandoned mysterious planet all on your lonesome, often with little to no communication with anybody at all. The music tracks were more akin to melodies that, while catchy, never forgot their purpose: build atmosphere. Quiet portions would often have some strange and atmospheric sounds menacingly playing in the background to always remind you that you were alone and often lost. I wish I could play the tracks and sounds instead of just explain them, but I'm pretty sure Nintendo ninjas would crucify me, and as this is my first ever YouTube video, I'm not trying to start off on the wrong foot. What I will do is recommend that when this video is over, you take a listen to the tracks Bloody Tears from Castlevania and Kraid's Lair from Super Metroid. With excellent remixes found on the later GBA titles, they represent some of the best of what each IP had to offer, and in my opinion, as far as music and sound design, these were the top tier. If you've made it this far in the video, I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you to you. This is my first video. I put a lot of effort into this. The more people that like, comment, and subscribe, I'm told the further this video goes, which means I get to argue with more people in the comment sections about what or what isn't a Metroidvania, which is super fun and cool. So if you do me that favor and give this video a like, I'd really appreciate it. Let's move on to our final category, graphics. Now for our last category, before I compare these franchises in an all-out versus in our final segment, we're going to take care of the final thing here, which is graphics. Often seen by idiots as the most important thing in a game, they are not. They were always one of the standout features of any Castlevania or Metroid game though. Games can look beautiful but be a total slog to play. Luckily, this was never the case here. Castlevania and Metroid have both always sported leading-edge pixel graphics and design. Since their debuts, these games have always been a great showcase to what can be done with sprite work when applied correctly. Then Symphony of the Night came out and changed everything we thought was possible. Fluid animations, more detail, and a more expanded color set truly pushed the boundaries of what had came before. Unfortunately for the game, the world had largely moved on to focusing on 3D games at the time, and its appreciation and love would largely go unnoticed until much later, and to even now where it still stands out as a juggernaut in the genre. The same praise that was given to Castlevania's graphics can be said and is also true for Metroid. By the time it released on the GBA, it boasted some of the best sprite work to date, and even today you would be lucky to find something that looks comparable. Both franchises would also get 2.5D releases. They were critically received well and fans had mostly good things to say. Metroid Samus Returns for the 3DS and Castlevania on the PSP, along with a few others in a similar 2.5D graphical style. Great games in my opinion, but not where either franchise was at its peak, at least not at the time. I say not at the time because our latest release of Metroid Dread was 2.5D and one of, if not the very best games the IP has ever had, something I've seen a couple mixed opinions on, but they're wrong. Both Metroid and Castlevania's 3D runs were very pretty to look at. Metroid Other M even. They may not hold up now the same way something like classic sprite work will, but at the times of release, they did look very good. And the remastered version of Metroid Prime, as of right now, is one of the best looking games on the Nintendo Switch. My hopes for graphics in these franchises moving forward is slightly different for each series. I would like to see the Castlevania series return to its 2D roots and give us something resembling the past GBA games, or perhaps the new 2.5D style that Metroid Dread did so well. It would be a disservice not to mention that one of the key figures of Castlevania, Koji Igarashi, went on to basically make the spiritual successor to Castlevania, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, in a 2.5D art style that had all the things that made a good Castlevania game. It was received very well by fans and critics, and a planned sequel is currently in the works, if they ever finish those Kickstarter goals. Metroid, on the other hand, I'd like a sequel to Metroid Dread, using the exact same 2.5D engine previously used. Keeping up the classic Metroid experience, I think, is what would be best for the series. Based on the sales of Metroid Dread, I don't see this not eventually happening. In the meantime, fans like myself can look forward to the upcoming Metroid Prime 4, which after much turbulence and a whole restart on development, has finally been finished or close to it, and at the time of writing, it looks phenomenal. The previews shown for the game so far look exactly like what we would have hoped for, so the game seemed to be in a good place stylistically. Metroid has new titles coming and new merchandise releasing. Castlevania has a great ongoing show. We just have to hope Konami decides to do something with the franchise beyond releasing Netflix programs. And although very well made, does not make up for the lack of any new game. Okay, this last section is going to be quick, but there's going to be a moment of contention here. I'm going to quickly compare these games directly, and although I don't really believe in number scores, I'm going to say which franchise I believe is better in each category. But not only based on their individual merits, but what they contributed and continue to contribute to the Metroidvania genre as a whole. I'm not going to pander to any fandom here, I'm just going to give my honest thoughts based on all the context I've given in the video so far. First off, story. Metroid likes to tell its story through a deep lore that it feeds you in tiny pieces that if you're not paying attention to can be lost on you. It's full of secrets and mystery that can be totally ignored in place of focusing on exploration. I feel the story did this on purpose to further feed into the feeling of isolation and dread, however Castlevania does the opposite. It puts the story in your face and does a much more clear and concise job of letting the player know what they are doing and why beyond the opening moments of setup. It gives more purpose to the minute-to-minute story beats and does a great job of keeping things interesting with twists and turns, but here's the kicker. Metroid goes even deeper than Castlevania and does all the same great character and world building, it just takes the entire series of games coming together as a whole to finally do so. If you asked me overall which is better, I'd say I actually prefer Metroid, as a great ending can often uplift a story more than a little bit, and the ending of Metroid Dread did exactly that, but overall I'm going to have to give this one to Castlevania. It did a better job of telling the moment-to-moment story in each game, and did a great job of taking a simple concept and keeping it fresh. Winner of stories, Castlevania. Now for the gameplay. First, I'd like to say that I believe without one, the other would not have prospered the way it did. Metroid started the non-linear exploration that, besides in a couple Zelda titles, was unheard of at the time. Castlevania added deep RPG systems to the side-scrolling genre. Symphony of the Night went on to take the exploration and gatekeeping mechanics of Metroid and add even more robust RPG elements and systems than in previous games. These games literally are why we have the Metroidvania genre today and are both excellent, but there is somewhere Castlevania stumbled where Metroid ran. And that's in the 3D department. While not without its own faults and stumbles, Federation Forces for the 3DS and Metroid Other M for the Wii, the series was able to make the transition over without losing its roots and core of what made it what it was in the first place. Although some would argue the 2D games in the Metroid series lacked the same robust customization as the Castlevania games, they both were still excellent, and their individual mechanics or lack thereof served their individual gameplay styles very well. However, when it comes to 3D, Prime was well received and continues to be to this day. With the highly anticipated sequel coming with Metroid Prime 4, the series stayed a Metroidvania at its core, and where the Castlevania series tried to mimic something it wasn't and stumbled and never recovered because of it, Metroid stayed its course and is still going strong. Gameplay winner Metroid. Now touching on a very underappreciated thing in games, we move on to the sound. Both franchises had amazing soundtracks. Even the games that weren't as popular always had great audio. Both were epic and memorable, but Metroid did something Castlevania did not. It utilized the quiet. It knew how to make sounds and things that would normally go largely unnoticed come to life. Footsteps creating an eerie feeling of isolation. The sound of an alien creature clambering across the walls. Castlevania had sounds for all these little effects as well, but it didn't utilize them in a way that built into the game's atmosphere the way that Metroid games did, further adding to the atmosphere. All comes back to atmosphere. If a game can sound as good quiet as it does when it's frantic and loud, and utilizes both well, then I believe there is a clear winner here. Winner of sound, Metroid. Graphics. For the graphics, we will make this short and sweet, although somewhat anticlimactic. There is no winner in this category. That isn't a cop-out on having to pick. Neither of these franchises has ever put out an ugly game. Mostly. Some of the best 2D sprites and use of pixels I've ever seen to date are in the final installment of Castlevania, Order of Ecclesia for the Nintendo DS, and the best looking 2.5D game I've ever seen is Metroid Dread, so they even now currently continue to reign supreme in graphics. Both always were at the peak of what could currently be done graphics-wise and contributed equally to the genre. Winner of graphics? Both. Ultimately, choosing between Metroid and Castlevania often comes down to personal taste. If you're drawn to intricate lore, memorable characters, and a dark gothic atmosphere, Castlevania might be your preference. On the other hand, if you enjoy solitary exploration, environmental storytelling, and innovative gameplay mechanics, Metroid could be more appealing. Both series bring their own strengths and unique qualities to the table, making them cherished by fans like myself and forever influential in the gaming world. Instead of viewing them as rivals, it's better to appreciate how each has shaped the genre and continues to inspire new games and experiences. But since I promised to pick one, which I don't like doing, I'm going to go with Metroid. I believe it best represents what the Metroidvania genre is really all about and has remained more accessible as a whole. Also, Samus is just way too badass not to give her the win. Okay, if you made it all the way to the end, I just want to give a big thank you for watching. I hope I was able to bring a fresh perspective to this conversation. I look forward to hearing all your takes in the comments below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this and to let YouTube know I did a good job. And until next time, be good to your neighbors. Take care. Thank you for watching.